Today I'm installing vinyl planks flooring. If you've been following my channel for a while, you might know I'm rebuilding my entire workshop. The office part is pretty much done, but the workspace part is just getting started. Before I can go any farther though, I need to insert new floors. I only have one small problem. I don't really know how to do that. But hey, isn't that what YouTube is for? How to install vinyl floors.
A few moments later.
Okay, that doesn't look too bad. I think I can handle that. I only have a small problem. I'm missing some tools. I do have rubber mallet in my toolbox, so that's not an issue. But apparently I also need tapping block, spacers and pull bar. Now I have three options to solve it. I can go to a local market and look for it, but that might take a while. Or I can order it online, which I will do, but it won't arrive before tomorrow. Or while the printer was running, I cleared out the space I was going to work in. Another thing I needed to do was to cut a notch in the existing floor and run the extension cable to my table saw. Up until that point, I had the cable run across the floor and more than once I almost tripped over it. Not exactly the safest setup in the room full of sharp tools. With all the prep done, it was time to figure out how I wanted planks laid out. My workshop is longer than it is wide, and I like the idea of having the planks follow the same direction. I took quick measurements to calculate whether I needed to adjust the width of the first and the last row. Which brings me to tip number 1. Pre-plan your layout. What you want to avoid is doing all the work just to arrive on the opposite side of the room and realize you have space for only half or third of the plank. It just doesn't look good. You don't have to use any fancy software. A piece of paper and a little bit of simple calculation are all it takes. Take the full width of the room and divide it by the width of the plank. In my case, that's 356 centimeters by 20, which equals to 17.8. If I multiply the number after the decimal point by the width of the plank, it will leave me the space at the end of the room. Because of the shape of my workshop, I didn't need to do any cuts, but if your space is different, make sure you have proper tools. The table saw is obviously the top tool for this job, but I am well aware that not everyone has one. So the least I would recommend you get is a jigsaw. A circular saw would be even better. Yes, you can cut vinyl planks using utility knife, but honestly, making long cuts this way is just real pain, and all this effort, I don't think it's worth it just to save a few bucks. Which brings me to tip number 2. Get yourself proper tools. I know, it sounds pretty ironic coming from someone who's printing their own tools. But seriously, just because something can be done with improvised tools, doesn't mean it always should. Anyway, let's just start laying down the floor. The planks connect using a tongue and a groove system, when one side locks into the other. That usually means you should start your work in the left corner of the room and continue to the right wall. That, however, was a bit of a problem for me. You see, this part of the workshop was built as an extension to the existing structure, and it follows the boundary wall of the house, which gives it a little bit of an odd shape. So it made way more sense for me to start in the right corner and move to the left wall, then start here and deal with all this geometry at the beginning of my work. Which brings me to my final tip. Know your starting point, but be ready to adapt if needed. Some vinyl planks come in with built-in underlayment, which makes them waterproof. Mine, however, did not, and I had to lay down a separate layer of foam to create a moisture barrier. I started by laying out 3 rows, 1 full plank, 1 half, and 1 quarter. That helped create a nice staggered pattern. I used the 3D printed spacer to leave the consistent expansion gap along the walls to prevent the floor from buckling or lifting due to changes in temperature and humidity. Once the first rows were in, I followed the pattern across the room until last planks which needed to be cut to the size. I made sure to flip the plank and mark it on the back so the cut line is actually on the wall side. If I haven't made it clear already, the main thing you want to do before starting this job is to get proper tools. Sure, you can get away with improvised tools like you see me doing here with the crowbar or 3D printed tapping block that ended up looking like this, but I wouldn't recommend it, mainly because of the time and energy wasted trying to make it work. As my frustration grew, I came across the section of the floor that had plug I have previously installed. Seeing how easy it was for me to go around this obstacle because of the right tools I had for the job, I decided to do something more useful with my time while I waited for the proper installation kit to arrive. The next day, armed with the right tools, I was flying through the room. The only thing slowing me down was a rock bit of debris that just refused to let few planks click together. Before I knew it, I was working on the final row, which required me to cut the planks at some angles. I know, I ran in the risk of sounding like a broken record here, but again, having right tools for the job saved me a lot of time and a headache. I finished things off with installation of PVC skirtings that I sealed using some silicone. That covered the expansion gap and gave everything clean and finished look. I'm not going to pretend everything went perfectly. I definitely make few mistakes, but for my first flooring job, I'm really happy with how it turned out. And honestly, with the right tools, I think just about anyone is able to do it.